Good morning. This is the Blaine's World podcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also listen in on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and you get more information and listen to previous shows on the website, www.blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And each week we focus on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce Jensen Gelfond, owner of Asheville Digital Lifestyle. And Jensen, you can feel free to wave to all your fans and friends who might be watching this. So you want to wave to everybody? That's Jensen Gelfond. And Jensen Gelfond is the founder of Asheville Digital Lifestyle, which is celebrating its 11th year providing information, technology, teaching, support, and setup for Macs, PCs, smartphones, Wi-Fi, and other internet-connected technologies. Jensen is also involved in community building, storytelling, and supporting the reparations process in Asheville. I have to also, Jensen, give you a special thank you, because I think I've known you since all 11 years you've been in business, and you've only helped me, I think, 473 times, maybe 474, but you are the best, okay? It's just, if anybody's listening, he didn't ask me to say that about him, but if you have a technology question or problem, please call Jensen Gelfond. And now that we've said that, I can say goodbye and we've done the whole show, but no. Jensen, the question I ask, and I know the kind of story, but for the benefit of the people who don't, as a kid, you grew up where?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I grew up in northwestern New Jersey near the Pennsylvania border. And it was 5 years old when I got my first computer.
What was the computer?
It was a Mac Plus, so a small black and white screened Mac. And I was homeschooled growing up as well, so I had extra time to spend on that computer. And so it was just an amazing experience to understand the possibilities of what having a computer could mean. And I taught my parents how to use it, taught my grandparents, friends, family. It took coming to Asheville after going to college in Pennsylvania and all those intervening years to realize that a lifetime passion could become a livelihood. But thanks to you, in part, along with a few other great organizations like Mountain BizWorks, I was able to gain the business skills needed to start my business successfully over 10 years ago. And thank you so much for the part that you've played and for being my client and being you and going out there and doing what you do.
I'm trying to think that when I first started using you, but just I had all these technology questions. And the interesting thing, Jensen, tell me if I'm unique in this sense, but I don't really want to know, like you're great. You said you'll teach me something. And the beautiful thing about working with you is I don't necessarily want to learn this stuff. I just want it to be done. Do a lot of people have that same attitude?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And it's always, important to understand where on the spectrum somebody is between just take care of it for me, I don't care what you do, or knowing what you just did, versus, wanting to know exactly what's happening step by step, being there every step of the process, and then, being able to do all those things themselves once I'm done. And so even for people who would prefer that I do it for them, they still want to be informed about the process. There are a lot of technologists out there. There can be an ego issue in the technology trade, which means that there's a bit of information hoarding. So I'm always trying to make sure that I'm an open book. And if people just want to, sort of skip to the good part and have me fix something, I can always take care of that too.
Well, one of the things I appreciate just about you is what you just said, is that you'll fix things for me. And I'm telling you, Jensen, I don't know if there's been anything you haven't been able to fix. It's just, big time. You saved me so many times, but I just want you to fix it. And somehow you can. But here's the question I have to ask you on the air. I've never asked you this personally, but how do you find out all this information? Like, I'll ask you any question, and within seconds, you can answer on just about anything. Do you have like this big book you carry with you that has, or is it on your computer that has every answer to every question?
If there were a book, it would be outdated by the time it was time to answer your question. And that's how fast technology goes. Even just a few months later or a year later, there's a new operating system, and you have to perhaps literally throw the book out and create a new one. So it did take having a personal passion to be in this trade because I do always have to be learning new information. I use a technology called RSS to aggregate the information from dozens of different technology websites and put it into a readable format for me on a daily basis so that I am always absorbing the information that's out there in my industry. And when it comes to looking things up quickly, I'm a pro Googler. There's a lot of other things that go into it as well, but just knowing the topography of the internet and knowing where one might be able to look inside the internet's catalogs has served me well. And also having that stick-to-itiveness, that means that I don't stop looking until I've figured out an answer or know which way I need to go to get there. That kind of patience, that is a skill that I've had to develop over many years.
Have you ever been stumped by a question or something I ask or somebody else asks?
There are always things that I don't know about, and sometimes it can be difficult to find the answer. But at a worst case scenario, I need to find an expert in their field and make sure that that person, I have a good line of communication with that person. For example, I'm not a website editor, and I'm not very good in WordPress, for example, which is, many people have WordPress websites, and I don't pretend to be an expert, but I do know several people who do great work in WordPress. And so, it takes a village.
That's one of the things, again, you've been a help to me, referring me to other people when, that said they'd be better to work with. But specifically, something else you do for Jensen, and you don't publicize it, but it's been a big help, that you also help your clients get the right computer and get byproducts. Is that something you do on a regular basis?
Yeah, definitely. Of course, upgrading one's technology, whether because it's just not working anymore or because there's some new feature out that is really going to help you in your life or your business, is a typical cadence of the technology world. So I certainly do help people to buy a new machine. I can help them to press the buy button themselves. Even if we haven't known each other for that long, I can give people the tools they need to make a confident purchase. Or for customers who I really know well, I can buy the machine on their behalf and set it up for them with very little effort required on their part. And I know that I've helped you to purchase computers before, Blaine, and because we already have that relationship, I'm able to go further and do more for you. But even for someone who I don't know very well, there are always ways that I can help them to make a confident technology purchase so that they can get the most out of it. Yeah.
And I have to say, it's like a fan club. I'm the Jensen Gelfond fan club here, but that was one of the things you've helped me about 3 or 4 different times, getting a new computer, upgrading to a new computer, and the pleasure of it, that you moved everything for me. I didn't have to do it. And whatever it was a great service. Talk about something else you did, Jensen, which I couldn't believe you were able to bail me out of. But because of you, I'm pretty careful when I'm on the computer. But one time I got bit, or somebody, with ransomware. I don't know if you remember the case where I got ransomware, and somehow you were able to get me out of that. It was just amazing that I didn't lose anything. I didn't have to pay an exorbitant fee. And talk about that in general. If somebody gets hit with a ransomware request, I guess your advice is what should they do when they get hit with that?
Oh, sure. And, the one thing to know is that a lot of times when people think that they're locked out of their computers, there may not even be a virus. It may just be using social engineering to convince them that they need to pay a company or call a company. So even if you get that scary message on your screen, sometimes it's as simple as restarting your computer or pulling the power plug and turning it back on, and your computer may well be working. So keeping a level head is really important. Now, yeah, in your case, Blaine, and in some people's cases, the problem is deeper, and we may need to get a backup going from your data. And so understanding what kind of safety systems, what kind of antivirus system you have, or what kind of system that creates a backup, either on a hard drive that you own and that is separate from your computer, or a backup service that will automatically take your data and put it in a safe place elsewhere, is incredibly important for people who really rely on their computers. And that's a really typical question that people ask me about: how can I safeguard my data? Yeah.
And I never thought much about it until that time I got hit. And I guess it was legitimate that I thought I was in a lot of trouble, wanting. And then I guess the problem is to not buy into it, because if you do, you could be in worse shape. Just because you pay somebody doesn't mean you're going to get a resolution of your problem. But it's funny you mentioned it. I think that was one of the very first things you taught me. If something doesn't work, pause 5 minutes, unplug everything. And how come that works so often when you just unplug everything, then plug it back in, and somehow it solves a lot of problems, does it?
Sure. Yeah, the simplest solutions. Although these days, because of our lives on the internet and how much we rely, it's more than just unplugging the computer sometimes. Maybe it's unplugging your Wi-Fi router. Maybe it's unplugging your modem. Maybe it's unplugging your printer and the computer, all four of those devices before you see success. But even though computers are designed to be easier to use than ever before, they're more complex, and we ask them to do more. We ask all of our personal information to be automatically synchronized between all of these different devices. We want to do everything wirelessly. There's a cost when it comes to complexity about those things. But yeah, the old adage of just reboot is certainly valid even today.
Many times, but just all these different things we're talking about. I hope people are getting the sense of this, that I guess you could go, let's talk about other options. There are big box stores, that have so-called geek squads, what's the difference between Asheville, your business, Asheville Digital Lifestyle, and a typical geek squad? What's the difference?
Sure. So my business, I'm a solopreneur, solo entrepreneur. It's just me. I do have folks who help me in some of the tertiary aspects, like having an accountant and other folks sort of behind the scenes. But when it comes to who's doing the work for you, it's always going to be me. I have no plans to expand my business in the foreseeable future. And I love going out and doing the business and not necessarily managing other people. And so the benefit there is that we build a relationship over time, and you're also guaranteed to end up with me, who has essentially spent my lifetime accumulating knowledge and really love doing this work. And when it comes to one of the major corporations, you don't necessarily know who you're going to get. In fact, it's guaranteed that you won't be able to get to
Right.
pick who helps you. And I'm not sure of the labor conditions or pay scales of those folks. You may be paying a fair amount to the Geek Squad, but the people who fix your computer are not going to be paid necessarily
Right.
very much, and they may not try all that hard to help for some simple issues. Or if you need something at a time when I'm not available, it may be necessary to work with that kind of company. But my clients tend to really appreciate the fact that they know who they're going to be working with, and that we build up a relationship over time. And that's really part of the magic.
And so talk about how, if somebody wants to work with you, one of the great things also about working with you, I guess in large part because of the pandemic, but I love the fact that you can come out, and you've come out to my place plenty of times, but you can also do a lot of this on the phone or via the computer. Explain that whole process.
Oh, sure. And over the course of the pandemic, there was a full year where I was fully remote. I did not see my clients in person at all during the worst of the pandemic, but I was still in business and still helping my clients and solving their problems. So I do a lot of work over the phone, where we're just talking on the phone. And I use a program called Team Viewer that I can help people install. It takes a couple minutes the first time we talk. That will allow you to share what's on your screen with me and allow me to use your mouse and keyboard to solve issues. And so this is really good if there's just an issue with a particular device, a computer. But smartphones and tablets can also share their screens now. So when it comes down to it, most things can be solved over the phone, but sometimes people just really like that in-person personal touch. Or sometimes somebody is working with so many different devices that it makes sense for me to be able to just see them all at the same time. And I'm really appreciating the fact that there is more of a ability for in-person community now that is certainly coming back. And so there's a place for in person, but there's also a place for the convenience and quick turnaround of solving a problem over the phone. And I was able to solve nearly all of my clients' issues remotely during that time in the pandemic.
And raising my hand certainly solved every problem. It's almost like, no offense, I loved seeing you, but it didn't miss a bit, because anytime I had a problem, you were able to solve it remotely, which is just incredible. But I wonder, as you're at your computer there, do you have like the biggest computer in the world, the screen? Because I can't believe, I hate using, like the phone or other things to see stuff. And so you're looking at other people's computers. Are you looking on a big screen, or you just have good vision?
So yeah, I plug my laptop into a 27-inch display, and I'm able to see everything I need to on there. And I've got to set my laptop as a secondary monitor if I need to. It's a fairly simple setup. I find that if you go over 27 inches on the size of a display, you're going to actually have to start swiveling your head to see all of the information, and it may not be the most comfortable. So yeah, I've got luckily a great home office set up, and I'm always happy to help others, tune their home offices as well.
Do you prefer operating remotely or going to a client?
Oh, could you say that again?
Do you prefer operating remotely, or do you prefer going to the client?
Oh, so I think we talk about the platinum rule here sometimes, where, the right thing, in business is to be, going the way that the client is hoping. So, I always keep it, these days, I make sure I really understand what the client is going to prefer. And if somebody has a disability or somebody has a difficult time hearing, it could be the simplest thing to fix over the phone, but it's not going to work for them. And there's other times when it just doesn't work remotely. I do love doing the work remotely. It brings a sense of freedom to both parties, because we can just, take care of it in a shorter period of time. But the door is always open if we need to get together. And, I am enjoying seeing people more often. So, either way ends up working. It's just, what we both agree is going to be a comfortable experience for both parties.
Is it just me, or are there other folks that as you get older, you tend to become less and less interested in technology or finding out the details? Is like, in terms of your clientele, I know when it started, originally it was an older clientele. Would you say that was the case?
Sure. Yeah. I do work with a lot of folks who may be retired or semi-retired. That's a large portion of my demographic. I also work with a lot of other solo entrepreneurs. My business started working with a lot of different real estate agents, for example, people who often work on their own and have complex technology needs. So, yeah, was there a second part to that question?
No, it's just we're talking about the kinds of clientele you serve. But talk about, Jensen, working with me or any of your clients. How can people make their digital life better or easier, perhaps is the way to go? In other words, and again, you've helped me several times in this regard. Whenever I throw out a problem, make my blog easier to put together, and you came up with a way to do that. What should people do in general to have a better time in the digital world?
Oh, sure. And there's no one size fits all necessarily, which is again why I really, appreciate being able to help folks on a one-to-one basis, because it really comes down to listening to the person's needs. But people are moving away from computers quite a bit these days, and using their smartphones more, using their iPads more. And, those are just the devices that are lighter. They're simpler and less likely to have some sort of a problem. It'll work on the couch. It'll work in the office. Having the flexibility, instead of like going into the computer room and getting on the computer for, an hour or two at a time, people are weaving these devices into their lives and, want them to be seamless. So making sure that you can sort of transition from one device to another with a minimum of fuss, and making sure that all of the information that you care about is automatically coming up on all of the devices that you use, is a common issue that I help my clients solve. So it's not really about one device anymore. If the computer works perfectly, but the iPhone can't access it, then there may be a problem, and it may not be enjoyable to do that work. So It all comes down to needs, but certainly syncing the different devices is a primary question that people tend to have.
It's funny that, and you've helped me do that as well, but I still like having all my basic stuff on my PC, and I hate, Cynthia likes it, but I hate using my phone, to get information or to record stuff on my calendar. It's just, but that's again, like you said, different people have different needs and expectations. And I guess you have to work with each of them in terms of what works best for them. In terms of advice, Jensen, and again, you name it, call Jensen up, he'll give you the advice. And the compliment to you is, I usually take it. It's whatever you've told me to do, I'll take. But do you have any advice you give it to people in general, or the first time you meet them, in terms of working with technology or dealing with technology?
Yeah, so people often want to know, what can this device do for me? They kind of want me to answer, how can I use this device and enjoy it more or use it better? But I kind of like to think about it from the opposite perspective, from a needs perspective. What kind of needs do you have in your life that this computer might make a little bit easier for you? Are you wanting to, journal, have an easy journal that you can access? Are you looking to get your calendars synchronized? Is there something about the way that you've been surfing the web that is just like taking too long? Maybe your Wi-Fi needs to be optimized. So it all comes down to, what will make your life either more enjoyable or allow you to be more effective with your passions. The computer will always be coming out with, new features, but those features are almost a distraction to the core reason why we use the technology. And we use the technology to make things more smooth. The nuts and bolts of our life go a little bit more smoothly, so we can get away from the technology more often and enjoy our relationships with each other, to be able to understand what's happening in the world around us and communicate more effectively. So it's really around those needs that I ask people to explore, what could be improved. And then I get to work on their technology to make it a little easier and better for them.
And am I the only person who just has a list of stuff I want you to do? In other words, I'm looking at it as we speak. Every time I have a question, I say, I have a J file, just put it in there. And I wait till I usually have about 10 items to then call you up. Do other people do that?
Sure. Yeah. And I highly recommend, making a list before our appointment, which you always do, Blaine, because I want us to get the most out of every single minute of our appointment. And the best way to do that is to, have that question list prepared, or understand, what your goals are. I can tune up your computer. Won't necessarily take that long, typically, to do that. But let's do a moonshot of some sort and actually get this working to make your life better.
Do people, and I'll ask you to talk about the specific example, but do people also come to you and say they want to be able to do something easier? And I'll give you the compliment. I'll let you talk about it. But I've done that several times with my blog, and my blog takes me a lot of time to put together, but a simple thing you helped me with, I don't know if I would thank you for it, but just using bookmarks in Word. I had never known to be able to use that. And just talk about that, and I just used it the other day for something else. What do bookmarks do in terms of somebody working in a document?
Oh, sure. And so in Word, bookmarks allow you to easily get to a very specific point in your document via a list of clickable items. So if you have a very long document, like Blaine's World is, there's a lot going on with the Blaine's World blog or newsletter. So there's a lot to type in and a lot of information to navigate. And so it's finding those like very specific things that are going to help you, Blaine, navigate the digital world more effectively. And sometimes I will also write down sets of instructions or protocols for people. So if there is a certain feature of their computer that they use often and they get a little bit lost using it, I can just take a moment during our sessions and just write out something that will allow you to continue doing that even after our session is done, because repetition is often really important when it comes to learning.
But it was so helpful because just seriously, just the other day I did this again, that, I have the blog you helped create the bookmarks for, but then I was having problems, Jensen, with all the pictures I had. And specifically, I was trying to separate the pictures, and then I had Kismet pictures, for my cat. So they were running all over the place. And I just set up, thanks to bookmarks, So I now have, I can go to my general pictures or then just Kismet pictures. And just that little thing made my life so much easier because I was spending too much time on pictures, And I guess talk about that just in general too. A lot of people have a lot of pictures, they take. And does anybody, or I guess the way you're supposed to is take them and they get rid of them. But most people don't bother, I guess, to just keep them in the internet somewhere. Is that what happens?
Ultimately, that's the direction people are going in, because not only are people taking more pictures, but cameras are getting higher quality. So the pictures themselves are getting larger. And so oftentimes the number of pictures that people have are more photos than you could store on your smartphone unless
Right.
you buy a really large capacity smartphone. So instead, we purchase cloud storage from Apple or Google and have them store all the photos up in the cloud. And they're saved and backed up there. That is considered a safe way to store your photos. But of course, the trade-off is that you pay these companies a fee on an annual basis or a monthly basis for that. But that does make it very easy to access your photos from all of your different devices. And there's always a way to make a hard copy backup of the photos as well. And I'm always happy to get into the details there. But the cloud, or really, when we say the cloud, what we're really talking about is another company's computers in a warehouse somewhere. That's where your photos are being stored. Luckily, that warehouse is well secured and they know backup better than most people know backup. So usually a cloud that is a well-known one like Apple or Google is a safe place to store photos. Although knowing your password, turning on what's known as two-factor authentication to make certain that a thief or somebody who is curious about your personal life can't get in, those things become very important. And I do personal cybersecurity checkups for folks to help make sure that their personal information, stays in the right spot.
You recommend that people should go through the pictures and maybe I should be doing this too, just deleting them all, in terms of I must have a lot of pictures somewhere and I never want to go through them, but theoretically I don't need to keep them the rest of my life. Is that correct?
Yeah, you certainly could go through all your pictures, and this is very personality driven. Some people are detail oriented enough where it's actually fun to go through your old pictures and delete the ones you don't care about anymore. You'll save cloud storage money, use less space on your device that way. But for some people, that's just one step too far, and that could take a couple hours
Right.
of somewhat mind-numbing time. And so a lot of people, it's exactly the same with your email inbox. Some people like inbox 0 and keep it very clean. Other people have a Gmail that is 50,000 messages long. I think back to my realtor clients again, who get gosh knows how many emails every day, and they don't think about deleting those emails. But modern computers can handle thousands, if not more, of emails and many thousands of pictures as well. So it's not really a problem that you have to solve for the computer's sake. It's just about your personal organizational style. And is that going to keep you up at night and you want to take the time to organize it, or should you just let the computer take care of it for you? Luckily, technology has largely solved for that, and I can help set up either of those kinds of systems.
I'm just curious, you personally, I've never asked this. Are you a kind of guy, do you have thousands of emails floating around, or do you kind of get rid of them as you go through them?
So earlier this month, I got back to inbox 0 for the first time in a while. Literally 0 messages in my inbox. I think there are fewer than 10 in my inbox right now. So I do go through those messages on a regular basis. And for me, the clutter creates a kind of cacophony in the mind. That means it's harder to focus on what's important.
Sure.
So I'm very specific about what I allow into my inbox in the first place. And then I'll either unsubscribe or spam the stuff that is, no longer meaningful to me. And, then the only stuff I get in my inbox is the stuff I really care about, the things from real people.
Cynthia is a little like you in the sense that she every night she wants to have no email messages. And she gets upset with me, Jensen, and I have like 4,000 or 5,000, but I don't want to go. And I have the easiest way. I don't know if you tell this to folks, but the easiest way I clean out my mailbox is once every couple of months. I just do it by date order, so anything that's over than 3 months old, I just get rid of, and that seems to help me in one shot deal. Talk about one of the things you got me into, I'm very grateful for, and that's about password management, and I believe the one you recommended I still use is 1Password. Do you recommend those password managers?
Oh yeah, having a password manager is really essential these days for having a digital life where you can easily log into websites. I've seen people use all sorts of different systems, and really the system that works for you is probably the best system. Some people write them down on a pad of paper. Some people have them in Excel. Are those secure methods? It's debatable depending on where you store those files. But the easiest method is usually allowing a password manager to store those for you. Every web browser, whether it's Google Chrome or Apple Safari or Firefox, all have built-in password managers that allow it to automatically put your passwords in for you. But those systems can be really limited. And if you want something that is easier to organize and works better on all of your devices, having a dedicated password manager called 1Password, that's my favorite, is really a good idea. It makes it more convenient to store your passwords and allow you to look them up easily, but it also allows you to change your passwords more easily, which can be a real key to security. So it's both about convenience and security, and that's one of the most common requests these days. I just worked with somebody today on getting 1Password going, so it's definitely a hot topic.
What about a concern that some people have is that, what if 1Password ever got hacked, or what if somebody ever got into password, just like they got into financial institutions? Could that happen to 1Password, that somebody could hack into it or get all the passwords?
That's a great question. Any company could theoretically be hacked. The password managers are going to be more difficult to hack because their entire business is based on security. So the chances of 1Password being hacked are probably lower than some other companies. That being said, one of their competitors, LastPass, has been hacked several times, and there are real security concerns over that company. In fact, for people who use LastPass, it's probably a good idea to switch away from LastPass because they have been repeatedly penetrated by hackers, and it's not really considered a secure product by a lot of experts these days. Now, it takes time. If somebody hacks into LastPass and steals the password vaults, those password vaults are encrypted, and it takes time for hackers to decrypt them and actually use your passwords. So in theory, if your 1Password was hacked, there would be a time period where it would take some time for the hackers to actually get in and start trying your passwords. In that intervening week or month or year or however long it takes, you could just change all of your passwords and then it wouldn't matter if they had access to your old passwords. So there is still some built-in advantages here of the fact that these password managers encrypt their databases, which means that it's not, even if they get their hands on the files inside of the password manager company, it takes extra time for those passwords to actually be extracted. And so you can protect yourself in the meantime, as long as you keep your ear to the ground when it comes in. Any reputable company should be able to tell you, once they've been penetrated, you'll have the time to change your passwords, and it shouldn't be catastrophic.
You also mentioned a term I don't like hearing about, but since you mentioned it, we should talk about it, and that's two-factor authorization. And I find that kind of a pain, but it's something you recommend.
I do, just because a typical computer user will often use the exact same password for many different websites, especially if you don't have a password manager, or if you just don't prefer to use the same password on multiple websites. What that means is if one of those websites happens to get hacked, your password could get out there, and then hackers could start trying that password on other websites and see if they can get in. So the idea of having the same password in multiple places can lead to kind of a dominoes falling down of your websites getting hacked. And what two-factor authentication does is protect against that. For your most important accounts, for example, an Apple account or a Google account, it's a good idea to have two-factor authentication, because even if somebody gets a hold of your password, they also have to get a hold of a code that is sent to your phone to actually be able to log into your account. So for the really crucial accounts, it's a good idea to have that two-factor authentication in place.
Okay, so I don't necessarily have to do it for everything, but a couple of them at least you recommend?
Sure. So, financial institutions will often force you into it.
Right.
And if, they offer it, you should certainly accept it. If your email provider offers it, that's a good idea. And really any, for a backup service, that would be a good idea. Anything that holds your confidential information is a good idea. So, your magazines accounts, or, other accounts that might be shopping related. If your credit card gets hacked, your financial institution will actually protect you and refund your money if you go through the right process. But if your personal information gets out there and people are able to steal your identity, that can take a lot longer to recover from. So we really like to target anything that might be used to steal your identity or steal your email account. Those are really the crucial accounts.
And Jensen, if you would, in our remaining time here, kind of give me an update, if you will. I'm trying to think when I last had you on the show a couple of years ago, but over the last couple of years, things have changed. You're still helping me from a business standpoint, but I know you had a crucial year. It was the summer of 2020 was a crucial year you kind of identify in your life, in your lifestyle, lifetime. What made that so crucial?
Yeah, thanks for asking the question, Blaine. So, all of our lives changed a lot during the pandemic, and my life certainly changed. So, the summer of 2020 was when the George Floyd protests came to Asheville. George Floyd being the Black man who was killed by a police officer. And there were large protests in Asheville decrying what happened. And protesters went on to the Jeff Bowen Bridge on 240 and held up traffic for a period of time. This is something that other protesters have done as well, but these protesters, for the first time in the history of Asheville, Asheville police deployed tear gas and on the peaceful protesters. And there was harm was done, including somebody losing an eye when their tear gas canister hit them in the eye. And there was a curfew imposed, and it kind of shattered my idealistic vision of what Asheville is. I love Asheville, and many of us consider it a sort of a progressive mecca. But there is an under culture in Asheville that doesn't really fit that description. And so when those protests happen and the police responded at the behest of our government the way that they did, it really shocked me. And I realized, hey, I've been here for over a decade, but I still have some misconceptions about what's happening, and not everybody is treated fairly here. And I think I need to do more than just what I've been doing about it. I feel very grateful for being able to have started a business in Asheville and have that business flourish. And now I'm starting to wonder, what would it have been like if I were a Black business owner and trying to start the same business, or what's happening to non-white folks, to non-binary folks, to people all across the spectrum of differences here in Asheville, and how are they being treated by other citizens and by the government? And I realize there's a lot of work left to be done. And I've really started to focus more these last couple of years on understanding what's happening and trying to pitch in. And you may be aware that there is a reparations effort here in Asheville. And so there was a lot of land during the urban renewal, after desegregation in around like the 60s, for example. We had urban renewal, and a lot of land was taken from communities that were considered blighted. Those communities were largely Black communities that were thriving communities, and many churches, businesses, and homes were forcefully taken and destroyed. And that caused irreparable harm to the Black community, not to mention everything else prior to that in our country's history, from slavery to mass incarceration. And so there's a great debt that our town, and that I, as somebody who chooses to live here, owe to the Black community in Asheville. And reparations, there is a commission trying to determine what is going to happen to try to even things up here and make sure that Asheville can be a place for all people. And so I'm working to support that commission and to spread the word about it. For our Black community, of course, there are also, indigenous peoples who we displaced here. And, there's a lot to think about besides just, my own business, supporting my own family and within the, circle of people that I'm helping. Within my business, I realize there's a broader community that I really need to be paying attention to and, putting resources towards to feel like I am living my best life in this mountain town.
And talk about you specifically, Jensen, not so much you specifically, but as an example. So how did you become involved in this? Or I know you're reading about it, you read it all the time, but what did you start doing then in terms of getting committees or going to meetings, or how do you choose to get involved?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, I was wondering what to do after I kind of had that epiphany that things needed to change in the summer of 2020. I started by going to the congregation that I'm a part of, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Asheville. That is a connection that I've had on and off since childhood, and asking questions there. And I learned from some of the elders who were a part of that congregation about an organization called Story Medicine Worldwide, which helps people to tell their own personal stories in relationship to the oppressions that are happening, whether those are racial oppressions, gender oppressions, oppressions that happen in the context of religious institutions, or oppressions in the context of our capitalist economic system, and really to understand how our own personal lives have been shaped by that and be able to tell that story effectively to our loved ones and our friends, because ultimately, what Story Medicine and also the Racial Justice Coalition, which is an action-oriented group here in Asheville, what I've learned through my work in these organizations is that you kind of have to start with yourself and start with talking to the people who you care about and who care about you. And if you start doing, the right things, then you may start making relationships in places you didn't expect. You may end up having opportunities to support folks in ways that they really need. You can't really start with supporting other folks, though, until you get things right in your own heart and, get things right in your relationship with the people that you're already close with. So it's kind of an unfolding. And I really appreciate the storytelling that the Story Medicine organization did, as well as another organization called Story Parlor, which is an in-person storytelling organization in West Asheville that has been crucial. I was able to take a workshop with them, and it's just allowed me to have the language to talk about uncomfortable things. It's not comfortable to talk about racism and how that's affected or hasn't affected our lives. I grew up in a town that I only met one other Black person in my entire childhood, for the most part, when I was growing up. So I figured, I'm not racist and it doesn't affect me. But you know what? We swim in the waters of a country that has racism at its very core of its founding with slavery, and we've never really reckoned with that as a country overall. Doing this work is allowing me to do a really satisfying personal exploration in my own life.
And Jensen, if anybody listening or watching this wants to get in touch with you we'll talk about two different kinds of reasons. If they want to get in touch with you with respect to Asheville digital lifestyle, best bet is to do what?
Oh, sure. So that would be my website, AshevilleDigitalLifestyle.com. You can email or phone me from there. Absolutely.
Okay. And you can also, you have a newsletter, right, from there, which is do a beautiful job with that. Very informative newsletter. You can get on the mailing list there.
That's right. There's a newsletter tab. You can sign up there. Absolutely.
Okay. And the other thing I'm learning about Jensen Gelfond, this whole other side of you, the storytelling part of this and some of the work you're doing in that area. If folks want to get in touch with you about that, still go to the website, or is there a different way to reach you?
Yeah, I would say just get in touch via the website and, tell me why you're getting in touch, and I can, reply in the way that works right for our conversation. But just for the ease of, I'm a solo entrepreneur, so you send that message, it'll come to me.
Okay. I will give you a compliment that if you get in touch with Jensen, he will get back to you, so yeah, one of many things you do very well, Jensen, but that is one of them. And I appreciate all you've helped me over the years. And as always, pleasure having you as a guest on the show, and hope to speak to you in the near future, buddy.
Thank you so much for having me, Blaine. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, I'd like to also thank my producer, Cappy Tassetti. Hopefully we'll see everybody sometime in the near future. Be well, Jensen.
Take care.